Good day, this is Q from Golden Circle Games. I have a few more decks coming, one of which is from the new Baldur's Gate set. For now though, I have a non-competitive deck here for Raffine the Scheming Seer that I like to call Raffine's Horde. The sphinxes of Old Capenna were never many. Territorial and vain, they competed over public acclaim, fear and devotion, crafting prophetic forecasts to drive the masses to their temples. As a young sphinx, Raffine could count on half a paw the number of her own kind she knew. That changed when they came. Raffine's prophecies, which no one wanted to hear because they were dark and grim and spoke of a shining metal end, were correct. She alone was raised up, granted demonic investiture by an archdemon, and now in New Capenna, Raffine is one of the only sphinxes that remains. Good, she likes it that way. At least this time they might listen when she says another end is coming. She dreams of nothing else. Raffine, Scheming Seer, is an Esper 1/4 Sphinx Demon. She has flying and ward 1. Her ability states that whenever you attack, target creature connives X, where X is the number of attacking creatures. The aim of this deck is to attack with evasive creatures who get value from connecting or attacking, churning through our deck, making our creatures progressively bigger, and getting into other spells which we can use to control and interrupt our opponents. General Esper stuff, really. Our win cons are through draining the life from our opponents by either creature damage or other means, and we might be able to win with commander damage, but that's not really the goal here. Mostly it's life drain or creature swing. The cost is $130 or €128. First we have Soul Ring, which taps for 2 colourless mana. Wayfarer's Bauble, which you pay 2 into, sacrifice Wayfarer's Bauble, search your library for a basic land card, put that back onto the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. Then we have Arcane Signet, which we can tap to add 1 mana of any colour in our commander's colour identity. Then we have Felwar Stone, which we can tap to add 1 mana of any colour that a land opponent controls would produce. Orzhov's Signet, which we can pay 1 into and tap for Orzhov. Azorius Signet, which we can pay 1 into and a tap for Azorius. Then we have Demir's Signet, which we can pay 1 into and tap to add Demir. Midnight Clock, which we can tap to add a blue, or we can pay 2 and a blue, put an hour clock on Midnight Clock, or at the beginning of each upkeep put an hour clock on Midnight Clock, and when we've got 12 hour clocks on Midnight Clock, we can shuffle our hand and graveyard into our library and then draw 7 cards. We do have to exile Midnight Clock after that, but hopefully we've got some value or lands out by the time that happens anyway. Tome of the Guild Pact, whenever you cast a multicoloured spell, draw a card, tap to add 1 mana of any colour. This will trigger for about 19 or 20 cards in our deck, so we do get some value out of it in this deck. We have Smuggler's Share, which came with the precon that this deck is based on, and it is an enchantment at the beginning of each end step. Draw a card for each opponent who drew 2 or more cards this turn, then create a treasure token for each opponent who had 2 or more lands enter the battlefield under their control this turn. We also have Sword of the Hearth and Home, where we attack. If we attack with a creature, it gets protection from green and white, and whenever a equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, exile up to 1 target creature you own, then search your library for a basic land card, and then they both come into the battlefield under your control and shuffle at the afterwards. Okay, we have removal now, so we have Swords to Plowshares, exile target creature, its controller gains life equal to its power. We have Dam, which we can pay for 2 black to destroy a target creature. Creature destroyed this way can't be generated, but we can also overload it, which means we will destroy all creatures and they can't be generated for 2 and 2 white. We've also got Counter Spell for 2 blue, counter target spell. Dovin's Veto, which can't be countered, and we can counter target non-creature spell. We also have Void Rend. This spell can't be countered, destroy target non-land permanent. Really good, as it says non-land permanent as well. That's pretty good. A bit of disruption. Nimble Larcenist, you play it has flying, it's a bird rogue, and whenever Nimble Larcenist enters the battlefield, target opponent reveals their hand. You can choose an artifact, instant, or sorcery from it and exile that card, which can take out some problematic cards in players' hands. Then we have Obscura Charm, which is a bit of a versatile spell. Choose one, return target multicolored permanent with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. We can counter target instant or sorcery spell, or we can destroy a creature or planeswalker with mana value 3 or less. Lethal Scheme, which we can use Convoke, which means we can tap creatures to help cast the spell, destroy target creature or planeswalker. Each creature convoked Lethal Schemes connive, so it triggers a bit of a connive situation there as well. We've got Utter End, which exiles a target non-land permanent, again non-land permanent being a very decent spell to cast. Then we have Evil Twin, which is kind of a spell I've wanted to play for a while. It enters the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield except it gains Dimir, tap it, destroy target creature with the same name as this creature. And then we have Hostage Taker, which when Hostage Taker enters the battlefield, exile another target creature or artifact until Hostage Taker leaves the battlefield. You may cast that card for as long as it remains exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any type to cast that spell. So a little bit of thievery there for our deck. Then we have a double-sided spell, which on the instant side puts target spell or non-land permanent into its owner's library, second from the top, and then on the sorcery side, from the graveyard, we can cast this spell. Each player shuffles their hand and graveyard into their library, then draws 7 cards. We have Aerial Extortionist that has flying. Whenever Aerial Extortionist enters the battlefield or deals combat damage to a player, exile up to 1 target non-land permanent. For as long as that card remains exiled, its owner may cast it, and whenever another player casts a spell from anywhere other than their hand, draw a card, which is pretty great for this deck, and forces people to draw cards, forces people to allow you to draw cards. And then Archfiend of Ifnir says it has flying. Whenever you cycle or discard another card, put a -1/-1 counter on each creature your opponents control. It also has cycling too, but we don't really care too much about the cycling too. The great thing about this card is it really synergizes with our deck, because every time we connive, we are drawing cards for the amount of creatures that are swinging. We're then discarding cards for the amount of creatures that are swinging, so our opponent's creatures are going to get -1/-1 counters for each creature we're swinging, which can be quite considerable and can mean we wipe the board on a regular basis. And finally, for our board wipes, our removal, we have Austere Command. Choose 2, destroy all artifacts, destroy all enchantments, destroy all creatures with mana value 3 or less, or destroy all creatures with mana value 4 or greater, which is very versatile for this deck. We have Slip Out the Back. Put a 1/1 counter on target creature. It phases out, which means it disappears until its controller's next turn. We have Change of Plans, which is X and 1 and a blue. Each of X target creatures you control connive, which means we draw cards for each creature, and they discard a card for each creature as well. And anytime we discard a non-land permanent, we put a 1/1 counter on it. You may have any number of them phase out, so they disappear and they don't come back until our next turn. Disorder in the court, it's X and Azorius. Exile X target creatures, then investigate X times. Return the exiled cards to the battlefield tapped under their owner's control at the beginning of next end step, which can save our creatures. Both the change of plans and disorder in the court can save our creatures from removal. Then we have Eerie Interlude. Exile any number of target creatures you control. Return those cards to the battlefield under their owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. Then we have Glorious Protector, which has flying, and when it enters the battlefield you may exile any number of non-angel creatures you control until Glorious Protector leaves the battlefield. And then we have Ink Shield, which prevents all combat damage that will be dealt to you this turn. For each 1 damage prevented this way, create a 2/1 white and black inkling creature token with flying, which can be pretty amazing when we're being swung at with a big horde of creatures. For say 50 damage, we make 50 2/1 white black inkling creatures with tokens with flying, and it can mean that we on the next turn win the game. And then a little bit of protection for our creatures. Swiftfoot Boots, creature has hexproof and haste. We equip it for 1. Dolmen Gate, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to attacking creatures you control, which might save our creatures, especially if we're playing against another creature deck. And then we have Bag of Holding. Whenever you discard a card, exile that card from your graveyard. We can pay 2 and tap it to draw a card and then discard a card. And then we can pay 4 and tap it to sacrifice Bag of Holding. Return all cards exiled with Bag of Holding to their owner's hands. Profane Command. Choose 2, target player loses X life. Return creature card with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Target creature gets -X till the end of turn, or up to X target creatures gain fear until the end of turn, when they can't be blocked by by anything except artifact creatures and or black creatures. And then we have Toulouse, Clever Conductor. When it enters the battlefield, it connives. Whenever you discard 1 or more cards, exile them from your graveyard, and whenever Toulouse dies, put the card exiled this way into its owner's hands. We have Silver Quill Command. Choose 2, target creature gets +3/+3 and gains flying until the end of turn, or we can return target creature card with mana value 2 or less from our graveyard to the battlefield. Target player draws card and loses life, and target opponent sacrifices a creature. Obscura Reference. Choose 3. You may choose the same mode more than once. Until the end of turn, target creature loses all abilities and has base power and toughness 1/1. Target creature connives, and target player returns a creature card from their graveyard to their hand. Then we have Karmic Guide, that has flying and protection from black. Echo 3, which means at the beginning of our upkeep, if it came into the battlefield under our control at the beginning of the last upkeep, we sacrifice it unless we play its Echo cost. When Karmic Guide enters the battlefield, return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. We have Writ of Return. Return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield, and this has Cipher, so we can attach it to a creature that we're going to swing in with, and whenever that creature deals combat damage to another player, it allows us to recast the spell. Oscar Rubbish Reclaimer. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each different mana value among cards in your graveyard. Whenever you discard a non-land card, you may cast it from your graveyard. And then we have Sun Titan, which has Vigilance, and when Sun Titan enters the battlefield or attacks, you may return target permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. That's pretty much 2/3 of our deck that's mana value 3 or less. So we have some of the evasive creatures in this deck. Inkfathom Witch, which has fear. and has 2 and Dimir. Each unblocked creature has a base power and toughness 4/1 until the end of turn. Skycat Sovereign, which has flying. Skycat Sovereign gets +1/+1 for each other creature you control with flying, which is quite a few creatures in this deck have flying. 2 and Azorius creature. Create a 1/1 white catbird creature token with flying. Then we've got Drana Liberator Malakir, who has flying and first strike. And when Drana Liberator Malakir deals combat damage to a player, put a 1/1 counter on each attacking creature you control. And the fact that he's got first strike allows us to put that 1/1 counter on before the rest of our creatures swing in for that hit, that powerful swing. So we have Champion of Wits, which allows us to draw a couple of cards and discard a couple of cards when it enters the battlefield, and we can also eternalize it for 5 and 2 blue, which means we can exile this card from our graveyard, create a token copy of it, but it's a 4/4 instead, so we're drawing 4 cards and discarding 2 when that comes in from our graveyard. Shadow Mage Infiltrator has Fear, and whenever Shadow Mage Infiltrator deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. Kami's Obscura Oculus, whenever you attack, target attacking creature can't be blocked this turn. It connives then choose another target attacking creature with lesser power. That creature gains double strike until the end of the turn. Now this used to be the commander of the precon deck that I bought to build this, and as such he stays in the deck. We got Dustmantle Seer, which is flying at the beginning of your upkeep. Each player reveals the top card of their library, loses life equal to that card's converted mana cost, and then puts it into their hand. Reconnaissance Mission is an enchantment. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. That also has Cycling 2. Dragonlord Ojutai has flying, and when it has hexproof as long as it's untapped. And whenever Dragonlord Ojutai deals combat damage to a player, look at the top 3 cards of your library and put one of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order, good filtering from the top of the deck. One of the cards I was really looking forward to putting in this deck was Dream Trawler. It has flying and lifelink, and whenever you draw a card, Dream Trawler gets +1/+0 until the end of turn. Whenever Dream Trawler attacks, draw a card, and then we can discard a card, and Dream Trawler gains hexproof until the end of the turn, but we have to tap it. So this is just fantastic for this deck, because when we swing with big creatures, Dream Trawler is going to get massive, and we're going to be able to draw an extra card and get it even bigger every single turn. So just a fantastic card. Great to have some lifelink in the deck just to recover any life that we have, and also very difficult to remove from the battlefield, as this card has a hexproof when we discard a card, and hopefully we'll have plenty of cards in our hand to discard to save our Dream Trawler. We have Strionic Resonator, pay 2, tap it, copy target triggered ability you control. You may choose new targets for the copy, so that's pretty good for this deck. Mask of Riddles, equipped creature has Fear. Whenever a equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. Ominous Seas, whenever you draw a card, put a foreshadow counter on Ominous Seas. Remove 8 foreshadow counters from Ominous Seas to create an 8/8 blue Kraken creature token, and this also has Cycle 2. This is amazing. I mean, I've had 5 or 6 8/8 creature tokens just from being able to draw that many cards in a game. Celephid Face Taker. It can't be blocked. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may have Celephid Face Taker become a copy of another target creature until the end of the turn, except it's a 1/4 and has this creature can't be blocked. Mask of the Schemer, whenever a creature deals combat damage to a player, it connives X, where X is the amount of damage it dealt to that player. just making our creatures bigger and bigger and drawing more and more cards. Thief of Sanity has flying. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, look at the top 3 cards of that player's library, exile one of them face down, then put the rest in their graveyard. You may look at and cast that card for as long as it remains exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were any mana of any type to cast that spell. Fallen Shinobi has ninjutsu 2 and Dimir, which means we can return an unblocked attacker we control and put this card onto the battlefield from our hand tapped and attacking. And when Fallen Shinobi deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles the top 2 cards of their library. Until the end of turn, you may play those cards without paying their mana cost. Rexall, the Risen Deep, has Island Walk or Swamp Walk, so if an opponent controls an island or a swamp, it can't be blocked by that opponent. And whenever Rexall, the Risen Deep, deals combat damage to a player, you may cast target instant or sorcery from that player's graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that spell will be put into the graveyard this turn, exile it instead. It's a big 5/8 as well, so it can pack a bit of a punch when it's hitting our opponent. Silent Blade Oni has ninjutsu 4 and Dimir, and whenever Silent Blade Oni deals combat damage to a player, look at that player's hand. You may cast spells from among those cards without paying its mana cost. That's a 6/5 ninja, fantastically big creature to be hitting our opponents with and getting some amazing value out of. And then the big pick out of the deck is Kreezer, Augur of Agonies. Whenever you draw a card, target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life, which is just brilliant for this deck and can be absolutely crippling to some of our opponents. Finally, the lands. We have Arcane Sanctum, which taps for Dimir. Cave of the Frost Dragon, which comes in untapped if we control less than two other lands. It taps for a white, and for 4 and a white, Cave of Frost Dragon becomes a 3/4 white dragon creature with flying to the end of turn. It's still a land. Caves of Koilos taps for a colorless, or it taps for Orzhov. Caves of Koilos deals 1 damage to us. Choked Estuary enters the battlefield. We may reveal an island or swamp from our hand. If we don't, Choked Estuary enters the battlefield tapped, and it taps for Dimir. Command Tower taps to add 1 mana of any colour in our commander's colour identity. Creeping Tar Pit enters the battlefield tapped. It taps for Dimir, or we can pay 1 and Dimir. Creeping Tar Pit becomes a 3/2 blue and black elemental creature token, a creature until the end of turn, and it can't be blocked this turn. It's still a land. Dark Water Catacombs, we pay 1, tapped at Dimir. Evolving Wilds, we can sacrifice it to search our library for a basic land card, put it into the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. Exotic Orchard, we can tap to add 1 mana of any colour that a land our opponent could produce. Then we have Fetid Heath, which taps for a colourless, or we can play white or a black. To tap adds 2 white, or Zelf, or 2 black. Hive of the Eye Tyrant comes in tapped unless we have 2 or fewer lands. It taps for a black, or we can pay 3 and a black until the end of turn. Hive of the Eye Tyrant becomes a 3/3 black beholder creature token with menace, and whenever this creature attacks, exile target card from defending player's graveyard. It's still a land. Obscura Storefront, when enters the battlefield, sacrifice it. When you do, search your library for a basic plains, island or swamp card and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle the library and gain 1 life. Path of Ancestry enters the battlefield tapped. Tapped, add 1 mana of any colour in your commander's colour identity, and when that mana is spent to cast a creature spell that shares a creature type with your commander, you scry 1. Port Town enters the battlefield tapped unless we reveal a plains or island from our hand, and it taps for a white or a blue. Prairie Stream enters the battlefield tapped unless we control 2 or more basic lands, and that also taps for a white and a blue. Rogue's Passage taps for a colourless, or we can pay 4 into it. Target creature can't be blocked this turn. Shattered Sanctum enters the battlefield tapped unless we control 2 or more other lands. It also taps for a white or a black. Skycloud Expanse, we can pay 1 into it to tap for Azorius. Sunken Hollow enters the battlefield tapped unless we control 2 or more basic lands. We can tap that for a blue or a black. Temple of Silence enters the battlefield tapped. When Temple of Silence enters the battlefield, scry 1, we can tap to add white or black. And finally we have 5 basic plains, 6 basic islands and 5 basic swamps. So thank you so much for watching our video. The deck list is in the description below. Please like, subscribe, comment should you enjoy our content, and if you want to have a look at our deck lists on Moxfield, please find the link below. We also have links for our Discord. Come play games with us, enjoy free content for visitors to the channel, which will be upcoming soon. We welcome all players to our community from all walks of life, so please feel free to come and introduce yourselves. We look forward to seeing you there. Good luck and goodbye.